Not everyone falls into addiction, and even fewer emerge from the other side, with life, dignity, and wisdom intact. But if these words have reached you, it means you survived something most people cannot even imagine. This is no accident. This is selection, true spiritual choosing, because God does not forge his most powerful weapons without subjecting them to extreme fire. He does not refine souls for ordinary tasks, but for missions of greater reach than the pain that shaped them. Have you ever wondered why you, of all people, had to walk through that particular hell? That question itself is the beginning of your answer. Carl Jung understood that our deepest wounds conceal our greatest potential, not apart from the pain, but within it, mixed into the raw flesh of despair, fear, and shame. Addiction did not choose you randomly. The world screams that it is a disease, a character flaw, the result of bad choices. But look behind the veil. Why then do so many sensitive, creative, empathic souls fall into this abyss while others walk unscathed on the surface of life? Because the rarest metal is always the most tested. The soul destined for the brightest light must traverse the darkest night. Your sensitivity was never weakness. It was an announcement of greater spiritual potential. Before you're fully immersed in this journey, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and activate notifications. Each week, we explore deep psychological insights from Jung, spiritual transformation, and practical paths to self-knowledge. This is not just content. It is a progressive series designed to guide you through the stages of individuation and integration. You'll find additional resources pinned in the comments and in the description below, curated specifically to support your personal work. Now, back to the fire that forges the strongest souls. Before the first drink, the first substance, you already felt the world with terrifying intensity, hurting more, laughing harder, lingering longer in every uncomfortable silence. This is not a mistake. It is design. As if God wanted to amplify your senses to the edge of what is bearable, so you could later learn to transform excess into depth. Only those who hunger for the infinite have already tasted reality beyond matter. And addiction is, almost always, spiritual hunger, a desperate attempt to fill a sacred void with profane substitutes. Yes, addiction is born where there was a crack in the soul. Abandonment, contempt, trauma, childhood leaves signs to be deciphered only years later. But it is precisely these cracks that create the possibility for light to enter. Jung called it the shadow, all the rejected hidden side, everything we expel far from our consciousness. And it is from the shadow that addiction emerges, seeking control from within what terrifies us most from without. What differentiates you is not the fall, but the survival and the return. Why does the majority never come back? Because they identify with the pain, they think they have become their own ruin. But Jung saw beyond. He understood that true reconstruction begins with surrender, the conscious descent to the bottom, where no mask, pride, or expectation remains. The rock bottom is not the end. It is the altar on which the old identity must die, so that the true self, what he called the self with a capital S, can finally emerge, renewed, whole, indivisible. How much courage was required? How many breathless dawns where everything seemed lost? Still you survived, and that, more than strength, is a sign of mission. Because whoever crosses that nocturnal sea and returns does not come back empty. They return carrying a silent fire, a light that serves as a beacon for others lost in the same ocean. Post-addiction life is not a continuum of miracles or absence of pain. In fact, the pain remains, but it loses the pulse of desperation. It gradually gains a sacred contour, like a battle scar that opens doors, even for those who never fell. You begin to perceive patterns. Old friends drift away, bonds change, perspectives expand. What was necessity becomes responsibility. Those who return from the abyss gain authority that no diploma grants. They speak in the language of lived experience, transmitting hope not as an abstract concept, but as fact. Your presence alone disarms lies, dissolves denial. The person before you, when they sense you have been there, recognizes it deep in their own eyes. He understands. She survived. Jung observed that those rescued by their own shadows develop a different sensitivity. They feel the pain of others, perceive the masks, know the extent of denial and the strength that each relapse hides. What was only survival grows into compassion, then becomes mission. The wound, which was once almost death, is now a portal. Your experience can be the key in the lock of another soul. In moments like these, the entire past finds meaning. There was no waste, no useless pain, only initiation. But it must be said, the old self truly dies. Your way of being in the world, your attachments, all the small illusions, everything is burned in the forge. And it hurts, because fire purifies by removing what was excess, everything that stood between you and your essence, between you and God. To emerge from this process is, by definition, to be someone reborn incomplete, because every rebirth is an open path. Alchemical gold does not emerge finished but melted, malleable, ready to give new form to a life of greater meaning. Now, what do you do with this fire? Here enters Jung's secret. It is not enough to survive. You must integrate. The higher self emerges when you accept not only the light but all the shadow, all the mistakes, relapses, falls, character flaws. It is total integration, realizing that everything is part of it, that the greater good is a function of radical acceptance. There is no pure mission without integrated shadow. There is no redemption without recognizing the ruins as part of the sacred ground. This is why those who have crossed the emotional inferno can help like no one else, those who still walk in the dark. You do not need to be perfect, you need to be whole. The call is not for isolation, but for sharing. True companionship, an encounter between the wounded who become healers, the practice Jung called the wounded healer, the healer who only serves because they bled. Your presence becomes sacramental. When you speak, you carry the strength of embodied example, of light, that only exists because it first accepted darkness. Perhaps this is why life brings you people in crisis, friends in collapse, strangers in despair. Each encounter becomes an opportunity to guide, to support, to witness the rebirth of others. And in each gesture, your own healing deepens. The cycle of transformation expands. You become a channel of collective redemption. Your gift is rare. It is not theory, not technique, but pure experience transmuted into active compassion. In the end, when you look back, you will understand. Addiction was not a sentence, but preparation. It was not the end, but the beginning. Your greatest shame is now a source of authority. Your pain, a source of mission. Your failures, credentials to open doors guarded by angels and the wounded. Your wound, and only it, opened the way. Not by chance, but by greater love. You are not alone. You never were. You never will be. The transformation Jung described as individuation is not a linear path, but a spiral descent into the unconscious. A voluntary confrontation with everything you have rejected about yourself. Addiction forces this confrontation in the most brutal way possible. It strips away every pretense, every social mask, every constructed identity. What remains when everything is taken from you? That is the question the soul must answer. And the answer is not found in the mind, but in the fire, in the crucible where the false self is burned away and the true self begins to emerge. Jung believed that every psychological crisis is, at its core, a spiritual crisis. Modern psychology treats addiction as a behavioral disorder, a problem to be managed with medication and cognitive techniques. But Jung saw deeper. He recognized that addiction is the soul's cry for wholeness, a desperate search for the numinous, for the experience of the divine. The addict is not weak. The addict is someone whose soul refuses to settle for the ordinary, whose hunger for transcendence is so powerful that it will destroy the body if it cannot find a legitimate spiritual outlet. This is why so many spiritual traditions speak of the dark night of the soul, the descent into hell that precedes enlightenment. Christianity speaks of death and resurrection, Buddhism of the destruction of ego, alchemy of the nigredo, the blackening phase where all impurities are burned away. Addiction is an involuntary initiation into these mysteries. You did not choose it, but once you are in it, you have two choices: be destroyed by it or be transformed through it. The difference between destruction and transformation is consciousness. Jung emphasized this above all else. It is not what happens to you, but how conscious you become through what happens to you. Most people who fall into addiction remain unconscious. They are swept away by forces they do not understand, acting out patterns inherited from parents, from ancestors, from the collective unconscious. They drink because their father drank. They use because trauma taught them that pain is unbearable. They self-destruct because some deep part of them believes they deserve destruction. But there comes a moment, a single moment, where consciousness breaks through. You see yourself, you see the pattern, you see that you are not your addiction, that there is something deeper, something watching, something that wants to live. That moment is grace. That moment is God reaching down into the pit and offering his hand. But here is the terrible truth. He does not pull you out. He asks you to climb. Jung spoke of the self, the archetype of wholeness, the image of God within the psyche. The self is not the ego, the small self that thinks and plans and protects. The self is the totality, the union of conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, human and divine. The journey of individuation is the journey toward the self, and it cannot be accomplished without integrating the shadow. What is your shadow? It is everything you have denied, everything you have hidden, everything you are ashamed of. For the addict, the shadow is enormous. It contains not only the addiction itself, but the lies, the betrayals, the harm caused to others, the harm caused to yourself. It contains the rage, the grief, the terror, the shame so deep it feels like it will kill you. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow, but you, whether you wanted to or not, have come face to face with yours, and that is why you have potential that others do not. Integration of the shadow is not about becoming a better person in the conventional sense. It is not about being good, being moral, being socially acceptable. It is about becoming whole. It is about accepting that you are capable of great darkness, and that this darkness is not separate from your light, but part of the same energy. The same intensity that drove you into addiction, when integrated and consciously directed, becomes the force of your transformation. The same sensitivity that made you vulnerable becomes your greatest gift. The same hunger for transcendence that nearly killed you becomes your spiritual power. This is the alchemical transformation Jung studied obsessively. The alchemists were not really trying to turn lead into gold. They were describing the transformation of the soul. Lead is the base, unconscious, wounded self. Gold is the integrated, individuated self. And the process requires fire, pressure, dissolution, putrefaction, all the stages of breakdown before the breakthrough. Addiction is the nigredo, the blackening. Recovery is the albedo, the whitening, the emergence of clarity and purity. But the final stage, the rubedo, the reddening, is integration, the wedding of opposites, the sacred marriage of all that you are. Most people stop at recovery. They achieve sobriety, they rebuild their lives, they become functional, and this is good, this is necessary. But Jung is calling you to something more. He is calling you to use your wound as a source of power, to transform your suffering into service, to become what he called the wounded healer. The wounded healer is someone who has been broken and put themselves back together, who knows the depths of human suffering and can therefore sit with others in their suffering without fear, without judgment, without needing to fix or save. The wounded healer does not heal from a place of superiority, but from a place of shared humanity. This is the mission that your addiction prepared you for, not to be perfect, not to have all the answers, but to be real, to be present, to be proof that transformation is possible. Every soul that has descended into hell and returned carries a light that cannot be extinguished. That light is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It was always there, buried beneath the pain, waiting for you to be strong enough to claim it. And now, here you are, scarred, yes, changed, absolutely, but also more real, more compassionate, more alive than you have ever been. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Addiction tried to destroy you, but instead, it stripped away everything that was not truly you. What remains is essence. What remains is soul. What remains is the person God intended you to be all along. This is not a message of toxic positivity, of pretending that suffering is a gift. Suffering is suffering. It is brutal, it is unjust, it is excruciating, but suffering that is metabolized through consciousness becomes wisdom. Pain that is witnessed and integrated becomes compassion. A life that has been shattered and painstakingly rebuilt becomes a work of art, a testimony, a beacon for others. You're not defined by your worst moments. You're not the sum of your mistakes. You are the totality of your journey, including the darkness, including the fall, including the climb back up. And that totality is sacred. Jung believed that the gods speak through our wounds. In ancient times, shamans were often chosen through illness, through crisis, through near-death experiences. They were marked by the divine, broken open so that the sacred could enter. Modern society has lost this understanding. We medicalize, we pathologize, we try to fix and smooth over, but the soul knows. The soul recognizes that some wounds are initiations, some breakdowns are breakthroughs waiting to happen, some descents into darkness are the only way to find the light. Your addiction was your initiation. You did not ask for it, but you received it nonetheless. And now you have a choice. Will you see it as a curse, or will you see it as the fire that forged you into something stronger, something more compassionate, something capable of holding light and darkness together without fear? The answer to that question determines everything. If you see yourself as a victim, you will remain a victim. If you see yourself as broken, you will remain broken. But if you see yourself as initiated, as forged, as chosen for a mission that requires exactly the kind of strength that only suffering can build, then everything changes. You are no longer recovering from addiction. You are preparing for purpose. You are no longer haunted by your past. You are empowered by it. You are no longer ashamed of your wounds. You are honored to carry them because they are the credentials that allow you to enter spaces of suffering that others cannot reach. Jung wrote that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. Addiction often runs in families, passed down not through genes alone, but through unresolved trauma, through patterns of silence, through emotional inheritance. But here is the profound truth. When you heal yourself, you heal backwards and forwards in time. You heal the wounds of your ancestors who did not have the tools, the language, the consciousness to face their own shadows. And you heal forwards, ensuring that the pain stops with you, that your children or the people you influence will not have to carry what you carried. This is the hidden gift of the wounded healer. Your healing is never just personal, it is transpersonal. It ripples out through the collective unconscious, touching lives you will never meet, changing the energetic inheritance of your entire lineage. This is why your suffering was not meaningless. This is why you were strong enough to survive. Because the work you are doing now, the integration you are undergoing, is not just for you, it is for all of us. There is a concept in Jungian psychology called synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, events that seem connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning, by pattern, by the underlying order of the psyche. If you have survived addiction, if these words are resonating with you right now, that is synchronicity. That is the universe, God, the self, whatever name you give it, reaching through the noise and chaos to remind you, you are not an accident. Your pain was not random. Your survival is not luck. You are part of a larger story, a larger pattern, and your role in that story is just beginning. The path of the wounded healer is not easy. It requires ongoing vigilance, ongoing self-work, ongoing humility. You will never be done. There is no finish line where you arrive and declare yourself fully healed. But there is a deepening, a continuous unfolding, a spiral of increasing consciousness and compassion. Each layer you integrate, each shadow you face, each time you choose consciousness over compulsion, you become more whole. And the more whole you become, the more you can hold for others. This is the paradox Jung understood so well. The goal is not perfection, but wholeness. Wholeness includes imperfection, includes failure, includes the ongoing struggle. It is not about transcending your humanity, but about fully inhabiting it. The person who has never struggled does not know their own strength. The person who has never fallen does not know how to help someone rise. The person who has never faced their own darkness does not have the courage to sit with someone else in theirs. Your addiction gave you all of this. It gave you strength, it gave you empathy, it gave you depth, it made you real. And in a world full of masks and pretense and superficiality, that realness is the rarest and most valuable gift you can offer. So what now? Now you walk forward, carrying your wound not as a burden, but as a lantern. You speak your truth not to glorify suffering, but to illuminate the path for others. You live with integrity, not because you are trying to be perfect, but because you know the cost of living a lie. You love with depth, because you have felt the full spectrum of human emotion and you are no longer afraid of intensity. You serve with humility because you remember where you came from and you know that grace, not merit, brought you through. And you trust, even when it is hard, that the fire that forged you was not cruelty, but love, not punishment, but preparation, not the end of your story, but the beginning of your true life. God forges his strongest souls in addiction's fire, not because he is cruel, but because the mission he has for you requires a soul that has been tested, refined, and made unbreakable. You are that soul, and the world is waiting for you to step fully into who you were always meant to be. Jung understood something that modern psychology often misses. The soul does not heal in isolation. It heals in relationship, in community, in the presence of another human being who can witness your truth without flinching. This is why 12-step programs work for so many people. It is not the steps themselves, though they are powerful. It is the circle, the sharing, the moment when you speak your shame aloud and someone across the room nods and says, "Me too." That moment breaks the spell of isolation that addiction casts. Shame thrives in secrecy. It whispers that you are uniquely broken, that no one could understand, that if people really knew who you are, they would turn away in disgust. But when you speak your truth and find acceptance instead of judgment, something alchemical happens. The shame begins to transform. It loses its grip. It becomes just another part of your story. Painful, yes, but no longer defining. This is the power of confession, not in the religious sense of seeking absolution from an authority figure, but in the psychological sense of bringing the unconscious into consciousness, of naming what has been hidden, of allowing yourself to be fully seen. Jung called this the transcendent function, the process by which opposing forces within the psyche are held in tension until a third thing emerges, something new that transcends the original conflict. In addiction, the conflict is between the part of you that wants to destroy yourself and the part that wants to live. between the ego that clings to control and the self that calls you toward wholeness, between the wounded child within and the mature adult you are becoming. Recovery is the space where these opposites meet, where they struggle, where they eventually find a way to coexist. And what emerges from that struggle is not the person you were before addiction, and not the addict you became, but someone entirely new, someone who contains both, who has integrated both, who can look at their own darkness without despair and their own light without inflation. This is individuation. This is wholeness. This is what it means to become who you truly are. But it requires something that our culture does not value. It requires dissent. We live in a culture obsessed with ascent, with progress, with moving up and forward. We are taught to climb ladders, to reach goals, to improve and optimize and become better versions of ourselves. But the soul does not move in straight lines. The soul moves in spirals, in cycles, in rhythms of expansion and contraction, and sometimes the soul must go down before it can go up. Jung called this the night sea journey, borrowing from the myth of the hero who is swallowed by the whale, who descends into the belly of the beast, into darkness, into the underworld. There, in that place of dissolution and terror, the old self dies. And if the hero can endure, if the hero can stay conscious even in the darkness, then a rebirth becomes possible. Addiction is your whale. It swallowed you whole. It took you to places darker than you ever imagined you could go. But you did not dissolve completely. Some part of you remained aware, some part of you held on, some part of you remembered that you are more than this. And that part, that tiny spark of consciousness in the darkness, is what saved you. Not willpower, not moral strength, not anything you did right, just that spark, that refusal to completely disappear, that insistence on existence, even when existence was agony. That spark is the self. It is the divine within you. It is the part of you that cannot be destroyed, no matter how hard you try. And once you recognize that spark, once you begin to tend it, to protect it, to let it grow, everything changes. You realize that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your cravings, not your history. You are the awareness that witnesses all of these things. You are the space in which all of this unfolds. And that space is infinite, eternal, unbreakable. This is the spiritual truth that addiction can reveal, if you are willing to look deeply enough. You are not a body that occasionally has spiritual experiences. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And that human experience, as brutal and painful as it has been, is teaching you something that cannot be learned any other way. It is teaching you compassion. Not the superficial kind, not pity, not condescension, but real compassion, the kind that comes from having been to hell and back. When you meet someone who is suffering, you do not see them as other, as less than, as someone who made bad choices and deserves their fate. You see yourself. You see the same struggle, the same pain, the same desperate search for relief, and you respond not with judgment, but with presence. You offer what you most needed when you were in that place, someone who believes in you even when you do not believe in yourself. Someone who sees your potential even when all you can see is your brokenness. Someone who holds space for your healing without trying to rush you, fix you, or save you. This is the essence of the wounded healer. You heal others not by being perfect, not by having all the answers, not by being further along the path than they are. You heal others by being human, by being real, by being willing to say, I have been where you are and I am still here, and there is hope. Jung believed that the second half of life is meant to be different from the first. The first half is about building the ego, about establishing yourself in the world, about achieving and acquiring and becoming someone. But somewhere around midlife, if you are paying attention, a shift happens. The things that mattered so much begin to feel hollow. The achievements feel empty. The external markers of success no longer satisfy. This is not depression, though it can feel like it. This is the soul calling you inward, calling you to the work of individuation, calling you to discover who you are beneath all the roles and identities and accomplishments. For some people, this call comes as a gentle nudge. For others, it comes as a crisis. And for those who fall into addiction, it comes as an annihilation. But the purpose is the same: to destroy the false self so that the true self can emerge. Your addiction was not a detour from your life path. It was your life path. It was the crucible that burned away everything false, everything borrowed, everything that was not truly you. And what remains, scarred and tender and still learning to stand, is the real you. The you that was always there, buried beneath expectations and wounds and survival strategies. The you that God saw all along, even when you could not see yourself. This is why you survived. Not for yourself alone, but for everyone whose life you will touch. For every person who needs to hear your story, who needs to see that transformation is possible, who needs to know that they are not alone. Your life is no longer just your own. It belongs to the greater story, the collective journey of healing and awakening that humanity is undergoing. You are a thread in that tapestry. And the darker your thread, the more essential it is to the overall beauty of the design. Do not hide your story. Do not minimize your struggle. Do not pretend that everything is fine now, that you have moved past it, that it no longer matters. It does matter. It matters more than almost anything else about you, because it is the source of your authenticity, your authority, your ability to connect with others at the deepest level. When you speak from your wound, people listen. Not because they are voyeuristic, not because they enjoy your pain, but because they recognize their own. We are all wounded, every single one of us. But most people spend their entire lives trying to hide their wounds, to present a polished exterior, to convince the world that they have it all together. And in doing so, they remain isolated, disconnected, lonely. But you have been broken open. You can no longer hide. And paradoxically, that inability to hide is what makes you free. You have nothing left to prove. You have no image to maintain. You can simply be who you are, wounds and all, and trust that your authenticity is enough, more than enough. It is everything. Jung wrote that the greatest tragedy is not suffering, but suffering without meaning. When suffering is just random pain, just bad luck, just the senseless cruelty of existence, it can destroy you. But when suffering is seen as initiation, as transformation, as the fire that forges the soul, it becomes bearable. It becomes sacred. It becomes the very thing that gives your life depth and purpose. So take your suffering and make it mean something. Use it. Let it inform how you show up in the world. Let it make you kinder, wiser, more patient. Let it break your heart open so wide that the whole world can fit inside.